A routine patrol turns into a high-stakes operation when the Coast Guard encounters a mysterious blue vessel. As they investigate, the situation quickly escalates, forcing them to call for immediate backup. It was a usual day on the Gulf of Mexico, as Lieutenant Tim Reeves stood on the bridge of the Coast Guard cutter, his eyes scanning the vast expanse of water before him. Everything seemed perfectly normal, but 15 years on these waters had taught Tim one thing: appearances could be deceiving. When a familiar voice called to him, he knew something strange was happening. "Lieutenant." Ensign Mike Torres's voice crackled over the intercom. "Unidentified vessel on radar, bearing 157, range 4.8 miles. Tim's jaw tightened. "On my way, Ensign." In the command center, Torres pointed to a blip on the radar screen. "It's small, sir, moving at about 6 knots. Matches the profile of those decoy boats we've been seeing." Tim mused. "Captain Rodriguez, permission to investigate." The captain nodded grimly. "Granted. But tread carefully, Reeves. We've lost 2 good crews to ambushes this month alone." Tim's mind raced through recent intel. Drug cartels had been using blue-painted, low-profile boats as bait, luring Coast Guard vessels into traps where larger, heavily armed ships would suddenly appear. "Ensign Torres, I want a full spectrum scan. Sonar, thermal, everything we've got." "Check for any anomalies within a 10-mile radius," he said. For the next few minutes, the crew worked in intense silence. Tim paced the bridge, alternating between binoculars and the array of screens before him. "Sir," Torres called out, "I've got something, or rather nothing." Tim raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "The area around our target is too quiet. No marine life, no thermal signatures besides the vessel itself." A chill ran down Tim's spine. "They're using sound dampeners. These criminals are clever." He turned to the communications officer. "Contact Naval Air Station Key West. Request aerial reconnaissance now." As they waited, Tim ordered the cutter to maintain distance, circling the target area. Finally, a crackling voice came through. "Coast Guard cutter, this is Seahawk 1. We've completed our sweep. No additional vessels detected within 50 nautical miles. You're clear." Tim exhaled slowly. "Thank you, Seahawk 1. We're moving to intercept." As they closed in, the strange vessel came into view. It was a dull blue, barely breaking the surface, with an unusually sleek profile. "All hands, battle stations." Tim ordered. "Weapon systems online, non-lethal options only." The cutter's engines hummed as they pulled alongside the mysterious craft. Up close, Tim could see why it had been so hard to detect. It was a semi-submersible, a narco-submarine designed to evade radar and sonar. "Coast Guard, cut your engines and prepare to be boarded." Tim's voice boomed through the loudspeaker. Silence. The eerie silence that followed Tim's command sent a chill down his spine. The narco-submarine bobbed gently in the water, its blue exterior almost mocking their presence. "Ensign Torres, what are our sensors picking up?" Tim asked, his voice taut with tension. Torres's fingers flew over the console. "Sir, thermal imaging confirms multiple heat signatures below deck. But it's strange. They're not moving, at least not in any significant way." Tim's brow furrowed. "Could they be incapacitated? Or playing possum?" "Impossible to say, sir," Torres replied, frustration evident in his voice. After several more unanswered hails, Tim made his decision. "Prepare to board," he ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Within minutes, Tim and two of his most experienced team members, Petty Officers Johnson and Chen, were lowering themselves onto the protruding section of the submarine. The surface was slick, making every movement precarious. They approached the hatch, weapons at the ready. Tim's hand hovered over the latch, his heart pounding in his ears. With a nod to his team, he grasped the handle and tried to turn it. Nothing. He tried again, applying more force. The latch refused to budge. "It's been modified," Johnson whispered, his eyes scanning the hatch's edges. "Looks like it can only be opened from the inside." Tim bit back a curse. This was a complication they hadn't anticipated. He keyed his radio. "Captain, we have a situation. The hatch has been tampered with. We can't access it from the outside." There was a moment of silence before the captain's voice crackled through. "Understood, Lieutenant. What are your recommendations?" Tim took a deep breath, weighing their options. "Sir, I recommend we use controlled explosives to breach the hatch. We need to get inside, and we need to do it now." He could almost hear the captain's frown through the radio. "That's a risky move, Reeves. We don't know what's in there or what condition those people are in." "I understand, sir, but—" The captain cut him off. "Hold on, Lieutenant. Let's give them a few more minutes. They might be scared, unsure of what to do. We don't want to escalate this if we don't have to." Tim clenched his jaw, frustration building. Every instinct told him they needed to act now, but he respected his captain's judgment. "Understood, sir. How long do you suggest we wait?" "Give it 15 minutes, Reeves. Keep trying to establish contact. If we get nothing by then, we'll reassess." "Aye, sir," Tim replied, trying to keep the disappointment out of his voice. As they settled in to wait, he couldn't shake the feeling that every second counted. He turned to Johnson and Chen. "Stay alert. Anything moves, anything at all, you sing out." They nodded, their faces mirroring the tension Tim felt. For the next excruciating minutes, Tim alternated between attempting to communicate with the submarine's occupants and scanning the waters around them. The silence from within the vessel was unnerving, made worse by the knowledge that there were people inside, motionless but alive. As the 15-minute mark approached, Tim's hand instinctively tightened on his weapon. Whatever happened next, he had a feeling it would define not just this mission, but potentially his entire career. Just then, a muffled sound came from within the submarine. Tim froze, straining his ears. Was it his imagination, or had he heard a faint cry? "Captain," he whispered into his radio, "I think we just heard something. Permission to proceed with breaching the hatch." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Finally, the captain's voice came through, resolute and clear. "Permission granted, Lieutenant. Get our people in there, but for God's sake, be careful." Tim nodded to his team, a grim smile on his face. "All right, let's do this. Prepare the breaching charges. We're going in." The breaching charge detonated with a muffled thump, sending vibrations through the submarine's hull. Tim and his team instinctively ducked, shielding their eyes from the debris. As the acrid smoke began to clear, Tim's heart raced, his senses on high alert. "Johnson, Chen, cover me," he ordered, inching towards the newly created opening. The smoke dissipated, revealing a dimly lit interior. Tim leaned forward, his eyes straining to make sense of the shadows below. Suddenly, his blood ran cold as he was stunned by what he saw. "Oh God," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the confined space of the submarine. A burly man in a bulletproof vest stood, his muscular arm wrapped tightly around a woman's neck. The woman's eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her face. In the man's other hand, a pistol was pressed firmly against her temple. "Don't move," he shouted, his voice hoarse and desperate. "I'll kill her if you move." Tim's mind raced. This was far worse than they had anticipated. He slowly raised his hands, showing he wasn't a threat. "Easy now," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Let's talk about this. No one needs to get hurt." The man's eyes darted wildly, like a cornered animal. "Back off. Get out of here, or she dies." Tim knew they were out of their depth. This was a hostage situation, and they weren't equipped to handle it. "All right," he said softly. "We're backing up. Just stay calm." Slowly, carefully, Tim and his team retreated from the hatch. Once they were a safe distance away, Tim keyed his radio. "Captain, we have a critical situation. Hostage scenario. One armed suspect, bulletproof vest, female hostage. Requesting immediate tactical backup." The captain's reply was instantaneous. "Copy that, Lieutenant. Backup is on its way. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage." Back on the Coast Guard cutter, Tim briefed the captain in person, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Sir, we need to act fast. Every second we wait puts that woman in more danger." Captain Rodriguez's face was grim. "I understand your concern, Reeves, but we're not equipped for this. The hostage rescue team will be here in 30 minutes. Tim paced the deck, his mind racing. "Sir, with all due respect, let me and my team suit up tactically. We can use smoke canisters to disorient him and breach the vessel." "We might not get another chance," Tim suggested. The captain shook his head firmly. "Negative, Lieutenant. I know you want to help, but we wait for the professionals. We stand down and secure the perimeter. Is that clear?" Tim clenched his fists, frustration and worry etched on his face. "Yes, sir." As they waited for backup to arrive, the tension on the cutter was palpable. Tim couldn't shake the image of the terrified woman from his mind. Petty Officer Johnson approached him, his voice low. "Sir, what if we just sent a smoke canister down there? It might buy us some time, give the hostage a chance to break free." Tim shook his head reluctantly. "Too risky. If it doesn't work, we might provoke him into doing something drastic." He paused, then added quietly, "But believe me, I'm tempted." The next few minutes felt like an eternity. Tim's muscles were coiled, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. He knew he was disobeying orders by staying so close to the submarine, but he couldn't bring himself to move further away. In the distance, the faint thrum of helicopter rotors could be heard. The tactical team was almost here, but would they be in time? As if in answer to his unspoken question, a gunshot rang out from within the submarine, followed by a scream that chilled Tim to his core. His hand instinctively went to his weapon, his eyes meeting the captain's, a silent plea in them. But the captain's expression remained resolute. "Hold position, Lieutenant. That's an order." At that moment, Tim knew he had a choice to make: follow orders and potentially let an innocent woman die, or take action and risk everything: his career, his life, and the lives of his team. The gunshot from within the submarine echoed in his ears, a haunting reminder of the life hanging in the balance. He took a step forward, every fibre of his being urging him to act. Suddenly, a firm hand gripped his arm. Tim turned to see Officer Johnson, his eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and determination. He shook his head slightly, a silent plea for restraint. "Sir," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of approaching helicopters, "we have to trust the process. The tactical team is here." As if on cue, the rhythmic thump of rotor blades grew deafening. A sleek black helicopter appeared overhead, its downdraft whipping the sea into a frenzy. With practiced precision, Members of the elite Coast Guard tactical law enforcement team rappelled onto the deck of the cutter. The team's leader, a seasoned veteran named Commander Reyes, approached Captain Rodriguez. Their conversation was brief but intense, with Reyes nodding gravely as he absorbed the details of the situation. Tim watched, his heart pounding, as the tactical team swiftly prepared for action, their movements fluid and practiced. Commander Reyes approached him, his eyes sharp and focused. "Lieutenant, I understand you've had eyes on the situation. Any last-minute intel?" Reyes listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking for clarification. "All right, people," he called out to his team. "We've got a hostage situation with at least one armed suspect and possible injuries inside. We go in fast, and we go in hard." "Clear." A chorus of affirmatives rang out. With a nod from Reyes, 2 team members lobbed gas canisters into the submarine's open hatch. The canisters hissed as they released their disorienting payload. Seconds later, Reyes gave the signal, and the tactical team swarmed into the narco-sub with practiced efficiency. The next few minutes were agonizing for Tim and his crew. Muffled sounds of shouting and scuffling emanated from the submarine, punctuated by what might have been gunshots. Tim's hand never left his weapon, every muscle in his body tense and ready to spring into action if needed. Then movement at the hatch caught his eye. A woman emerged, her face tear-streaked and pale but alive. She was quickly followed by 2 more individuals, both looking shaken but unharmed. Tim felt a wave of relief wash over him as he realized these must be the hostages. Finally, members of the tactical team began to emerge, escorting 4 handcuffed men, the armed suspects. Their faces were a mask of defiance and fear, their eyes darting wildly as they were led away. Commander Reyes was the last to exit the submarine. He approached Captain Rodriguez and Tim, his expression grim but satisfied. "Submarine's clear," he reported. 4 suspects in custody, 3 hostages rescued. We've got 1 injured individual inside, one of the traffickers. Looks like he was shot by our primary suspect." Tim's mind reeled. "The gunshot we heard." Reyes nodded. "Seems our guy panicked when he heard us coming and turned on one of his own." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "Excellent work, Commander. What's our next step?" "We'll need to process the scene," Reyes replied. He turned to Tim. "Lieutenant, I understand you and your team were first on site. Care to take a look inside? We could use your eyes." Tim nodded eagerly, grateful to finally be of use. He and his team carefully entered the submarine, their eyes widening at what they found. The interior was a maze of sophisticated equipment and tightly packed bales. Tim's experienced eye quickly assessed the situation. "Captain," he called out, "we're looking at about 2 tons of cocaine here. Street value easily in the hundreds of millions." As they continued their inspection, Tim couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions: pride in the successful resolution of the hostage situation, relief that no innocent lives were lost, and a gnawing frustration at his own helplessness during the ordeal. Back on deck, the rescued hostages were being tended to by medical personnel. Tim approached one of them, a young woman who seemed the least shaken of the 3. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I'm Lieutenant Reeves. Can you tell me what happened?" The woman, who introduced herself as Maria, spoke in halting English. "We were forced into the submarine. They said they would kill our families if we didn't cooperate. When your team arrived, George, the leader, he panicked. He shot Miguel and took me hostage. I thought I was going to die." Tim placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now. We'll make sure you and your families are protected." As the night wore on, the scene transformed into a hive of activity. Evidence was catalogued, statements were taken, and plans were made to tie the narco sub to a secure location for further investigation. Tim found himself standing at the railing of the cutter, looking out over the dark water. Captain Rodriguez approached, standing silently beside him for a moment. "You did good work today, Reeves," the captain finally said. Tim nodded, still feeling the weight of the day's events. "Thank you, sir, but I can't help feeling like I should have done more." The captain turned to face him. "Sometimes the hardest part of our job is knowing when to act and when to wait. You showed remarkable restraint today, and that's just as important as taking action." As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Tim realized that this experience had changed him. He had faced a moment of crisis, a test of his judgment and his principles. And while he hadn't fired a single shot, he had played a crucial role in saving lives and stopping a major drug trafficking operation. The narco sub, now secured and under guard, served as a silent reminder of the constant battle they faced. But as Tim watched the sunrise, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. There would be other challenges, other difficult decisions to make, but he was ready to face them, armed with the lessons learned from this harrowing night on the high seas.